brothers, fathers, sons in the army. And we all know we have to add in joy, we have to add in dancing, we have to add in singing. That's our power. I want to focus on the foundational perspective on how Torah views Israel, wars and conflicts. And of course, before we started, Dorit, Rina, and Yael were sharing how they're reacting to things going on in the world. And that's definitely something I want to touch on. But that's like the third or fourth thing I want to touch on. So I'll go in order of what I think is important. And every one of us, even though of course we could say we're preaching to the choir and everything I'm going to say we all know, but every one of us, one way or another, becomes a representative of the land of Israel, of the government of Israel, of the people of Israel. Every one of us might be questioned, might be challenged, might need to understand and be able to share. The first most significant point, we own the land of Israel because God gave it to us. The land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people because God gave it to us. And the only way we can have real and lasting peace in that whole area of Israel in the Middle East is to understand this, is to understand that this is the foundational point. And this is the opening words of Torah, Bereshis, which of course, non-coincidentally, was the Torah portion of Simchas Torah, the day of the attack in Israel. Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es haaretz. We translated erroneously as in the beginning God created heaven and earth. That is not what those words mean. If it meant that, it would say Barishayna bara Elokim hashamayim ve'es haaretz. It's not what it says. It says Bereshis. And there's a whole Rashi explaining that and explaining how it's for the sake of the Jewish people, for the sake of Torah, is all of creation. But then Rashi goes on and says, why are we talking about this? Torah is not a history book. Torah is not a storybook. Torah is from the word hora'ah, instruction. How a Jew is supposed to live in this world. How, for that matter, a non-Jew is supposed to live in this world. So what are we talking about creation for? Torah Chef started with the first commandment, which is all the way in the next book of Exodus and Shmos. HaChodesh hazeh lachem. This month is the first of your months. So why did God start with creation? And Rashi quotes and says, because there'll be a time that the nations will say, you are robbers, as we might say nowadays. You are colonizers. You took the land of the 7 nations. How dare you take it? It's not your land. Give it back. And we respond by saying, no, look at the Bible. Look at the Old Testament. God created the world. God gave this land of Israel to the Jewish people. At a certain time, he let the 7 nations live there. Then he took it from them and gave it back to us as per his eternal promise to Abraham in the Bris Ben Habsarim, in the covenant between the pieces. This is
Can I ask?
Yes.
Sorry. No, I don't mean to stop you mid-sentence.
No.
I'm so sorry.
Ask. Stop me. Interrupt me. Go for it.
What I want to ask is on this very notion of we believe in the Torah. So of course, this is in our favor, but other people that don't believe in the Torah, other religions are saying, well, we can write our own book and write whatever we want in it too. Our thing says it belongs to us. What's our argument here? Yes.
First of all, we know the strongest weapon is truth, despite whatever is happening in the world. This is a truth. And the truth of the Torah, as I'm saying, the Old Testament, the Bible, is believed by all these nations of Western Europe and America, all Christian nations, accept the Bible as truth. It's not like you were saying before. So if I show them all the facts, then they'll, how much video footage do they need to see? How many photographs do they need to see for them to, that's a rabbit hole. Don't go down there. It's a dark rabbit hole. But we need to know what our answer is. Our answer is, this is the truth. Look in your Bible. Look in the Old Testament. Look in Torah. This is the truth. You don't want to accept the truth? You don't want to accept the truth. It's not like we have this land because of UN charter or whatever. No. We have to know and say and believe strong and proud, God gave us this land. And we don't have to worry, is this a believer? Is this someone who believes in the Bible? Is this someone who's going to accept the Bible? We don't have to go there. We have to know the truth, and we have to keep saying the truth. And when we stick with God's truth, that's the power. When we start going into apologetics and UN and no, then we lose it. Then we have no truth to be standing on. When we're saying the truth and we're repeating the truth and we're confident in the truth resonates. And it's okay if they're not going to accept it. Every time we say it, we're like putting it out there in the world. Just like about the idea of positive thoughts create positive reality. And we explained that there could be in the world two options. But when we focus on the positive and speak about the positive and believe in the positive and talk about the positive and talk about the positive and talk about the positive, that infuses it with energy. That manifests it. That allows it to be, which, by the way, isn't even only a Jewish belief or a Jewish power. It's really a power every human has. Positive thoughts creating positive reality. So similarly here, what we are putting out in the world is we own this land because Torah says so, because the Talmud says so, because the Bible says so. And each time as we go back to the basics, this is God's world and God gave this land to us. We're like revivifying the real mandate we have over Israel, the real power we have over Israel. We're not getting distracted by all the junk politicians talk and say and all the foolishness. You get snared and snared and snared in all of those traps. We're cutting through all that. We're going to the foundation. This is practical. If you think about it, when Rashi wrote this, he wrote it in the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages was a horrific time for the Jewish people. In the Middle Ages, Jewish blood washed the world like water. And still Rashi wrote it very practically. And we need to know, understand, believe it, and say it. Now, obviously, it would be far better if the leaders of Israel understood it, believed it, and repeated it, and repeated it, and repeated it. Our mandate doesn't come from the UN. Our deed is Torah. Our deed is the Bible. Our deed is the Old Testament. But by our saying it and saying it and saying it and being that our go-to, it helps them because it just puts it out more and more and more and more and more and more and more. And so that is just the first foundational thing we have to remember. This is our land. God gave it to us. And that's why God bothered writing an entire book, a whole history, to lay it out. These are the facts. The land of Israel is the land of the Jews. And that's why a lot of support of America, a lot of American support of Israel, we think it comes from Israeli lobbyists. It doesn't. It comes from fundamental Christian lobbyists because they know this is true. This is part of their belief system. And they have a lot of money and they put a lot of it into supporting Israel because this is what the Bible says. Again, not that we're doing it to get fundamental Christians on board. I'm just saying that as PS, yes, this is part of Christian doctrine, and it's actually not something that the Muslims reject if they actually go back to the roots of their religion instead of what's happened to them lately. So that's the first.
But they don't accept it.
So we just keep saying it. We just keep saying it. You just stick with truth and don't get stuck in lies. This is our land. This is what it says in the Bible. This is the land God gave us, and that's it. And that's it. That's what we know. Don't get stuck in the web of lies. Literally, when we start going back and forth with them, we lost our footing in Torah. Then it's my words, your words, my words, your words. The missile yesterday did come from Israel. No, it didn't. No, we can prove it by a video recording. We can prove it by the shrapnel. We can prove it by the videos. Who cares? We can prove it by. People don't want to believe it. Not going to believe it anyway. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? So just stick with truth. Nothing else.
What I heard yesterday that really disgusted me was a Muslim speaking and saying that, like, talking about this point that, like, the Jews call it their land. It's not their land. They weren't even occupying it. We were here. And when they were getting slaughtered by the Nazis, we were the ones who took them in as refugees. I was like, what? I haven't heard that one before. You guys took us in as refugees. Okay.
But I'm saying don't bother. We don't, there's an expression, a statement of our sages. When you fight with someone who's dirty, you get dirty. Don't bother. Just keep repeating the truth and don't fight with someone dirty. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant if you tell them the truth, let alone irrelevant if you get stuck in the lies. It doesn't make a difference. We need to know the truth, and the truth is what Torah tells us. And everything else is irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. A second very important point, Jewish law. This is from Orach Chaim, the laws of Shabbat, chapter 329, paragraphs 6 and 7. I don't think if you're going to look it up, but I'm going to say it one more time. It's in the Code of Jewish Law, Orach Chaim, the laws of Shabbat, of Shabbos, chapter or section 329, paragraphs 6 and 7. It's talking, basically bringing out the point that when our lives are at stake, nothing else is important. Discussing, of course, the laws of Shabbat. And it says, if non-Jews come on the Shabbos, on the Shabbat, and demand money, you can't desecrate the Shabbos to fight them. You're not allowed to. We don't desecrate the Shabbos for money. But if someone comes to kill you, or without explaining, so maybe they're coming to kill you, we do desecrate the Shabbos, the Shabbat, to fight them. We have to protect ourselves. We go out with weapons. So that's like the basics. If non-Jews come on the Shabbos, on the Shabbat, and demand money, you are not allowed to desecrate the Shabbos over money. If non-Jews come on the Shabbos to kill you, or we don't know why they're coming, you can assume they're coming to kill you, and we do desecrate the Shabbos to protect ourselves, and we go out and we fight. But then the code of Jewish law continues. But if the city is near a border, it's near the border, and these non-Jews only are asking for straw and hay, meaning something, they're only asking for something of finance, and it's minuscule money. We go out and desecrate the Shabbos, desecrate the Shabbat, and fight them. They're only after money. They're after a very small amount of money, straw and hay. And we have to desecrate the Shabbos. Why? As the law continues to say, because we don't want to make the entire country easy to conquer. So if they're coming for money, we don't desecrate the Shabbos. If they're coming over lives or we're not sure where they're coming, we desecrate the Shabbos. We fight. Human life is more valuable. And if they're coming over money, small amount of money, straw and hay, but they're coming to a border city, we go out and fight them. We desecrate the Shabbos. Because if we give in on that border city, we made the entire country vulnerable. That's the halacha. The Ramah, Moshe Isserles adds, even if they haven't arrived at the city, it's Shabbos. There's non-Jews coming. They want our straw and hay, money things, small change money things. We know they're coming. We know they want to come, and we learn about it. We have to go out with weapons to fight them. We make preemptive strikes. We don't wait for them to attack us and then we fight back for them to get or not get their straw and hay. We launch a preemptive strike like Israel did by the 6-Day War and did not do by the Yom Kippur War at a tremendous, tremendous cost of lives. And there was amazing miracles by the Yom Kippur War, and it ended in victory anyway, but there was a big, big cost because we didn't make that preemptive strike. We need to do anything we can militarily to save and protect Jewish lives. That's halacha. That's Jewish law. That's what Torah tells us. Torah is telling us projecting strength is our greatest deterrent. That saves lives. It saves Jewish lives, and it saves the lives of other civilians as well. If there's no fighting, nobody's going to have a loss of life. No one's going to have a loss of basic needs and water and sustenance. If there's no fighting, then everyone's okay. But we have to start by doing anything we can militarily to save and protect Jewish lives. That is what halacha, what Jewish law is saying. We have to project strength. We have to make a preemptive strike. That's the greatest way to save lives. Now, I just want to put this law in perspective for you to understand it fully. This law is not talking about Israel. The source of this law, of course, the Shulchan Aruch is coming from ultimately from the Talmud. In the Talmud, they're talking about a city in Babylonia, a Jewish city near Iraq today, called Naharda. This city has nothing to do with the holiness of Israel, but it was a city of Jews. It's about protecting Jewish lives. That's the halacha. We desecrate Shabbos to protect Jewish lives. We desecrate Shabbos even if seemingly Jewish lives are not on the table. But if it's a border city, and basically everywhere in Israel is a border city, we can't afford to say, they just want straw and hay. Give it to them. Who cares? We don't even care about our straw and hay. We can't, because once we let them have a foothold in that border city, the whole country is vulnerable. And it doesn't make a difference if it's a holy place in Israel or if it's literally outside of Israel. Naharda is literally in Babylonia. Doesn't make a difference. It's a city of Jews. We do whatever it takes to defend Jewish lives. That's our priority. That has to be the priority of the Israeli government. How do we make it the priority? The only thing we can do is just like I said about point number 1. Talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. Put it out in the world. Put out the energy. Believe in that energy. Repeat that energy. Speak to people about that energy. Strengthen people's morale about that energy. This is Torah. This is halacha. This is what God is saying. And the more we say it and believe it and repeat it and say it and believe it and repeat it, we are strengthening it spiritually in the world. So people that maybe are very challenged in this area, God forbid, their backbone will stiffen because of what we're putting out This is Torah, this is halacha, this is literally, I gave you the source, Jewish law. Third point that we need to know and believe, and again, just by saying it, that's what we can do, is whatever Israel does, they have to finish the job. God has given us in the past unbelievable victories. And unfortunately, a lot of times with these unbelievable victories, we stop the wars. We just said, okay, we're done. We won. We're done. Because we heard messages from Washington telling us to stop, and we listened, even though they didn't mean it. We all, I think, know that Washington really wants us to destroy this Arab terrorist power. It's necessary for them. But sometimes they tell us things that we should ignore, and they want us to ignore, but they have to tell it to us. And it's going back to point 1 and 2. We can't think of politics. We can't let a war be run by politicians. A war has to be run by the military, because military will fight until the end, until a complete victory. And military will know that unless there's a complete victory, we didn't win. They're just going to come back. Is it going to take a year for them to rebuild? Is it going to take 2 years for them to rebuild? Is it going to take 3 years for them to rebuild? They're just going to come back. All of the victories in the past have been miracles, as we discussed at length last week. We're not giving IDF credit. We're giving God credit. And good things come through good people. And obviously there's many, many soldiers. Every Jewish soldier is a kadosh. Every Jew that dies defending Israel is ultimately holy, like someone who self-sacrificed for the sanctification of God's name. But God's protecting us. God is giving overt, miraculous intervention. And God is blessing our efforts. We need to make efforts, like focusing on the military and protecting Jewish lives and not worrying about the politics. And we need all the spiritual arsenal. We have a lot, as we were discussing in the beginning, before we started officially the class. We have amazing unity, which is tremendous spiritual arsenal. We have trust. We have tefillin. Every time someone puts on tefillin, it's protecting a soldier in Israel. Torah study by children. We discussed last week the idea of letters in the Sefer Torah to unite the Jews and to protect every Jewish soldier. Any addition in Torah mitzvahs, anything you do, wait, is this on the list? Don't worry about it. Everything you do is giving more and more spiritual arsenal, so the army can fight until the ultimate victory and should not be worried about world opinion. That's the best way to ensure Jewish lives are safe and secure. And many times in the history of the wars in Israel, this came up again and again and again. In the Yom Kippur War, it's very interesting. The man that relates this, he worked for the Jewish Agency for Israel. He was a very high director there for the United States and Canada, and he would come to 770 to participate in the Rebbe's Farbrengens. So this is the night of Simchas Torah. So for him already, it's not the holiday, it's not the Chag. And he and a colleague that were very senior representatives of the state of Israel, they went to 770, where the Rebbe was about to hold Simchas Torah HaKafos. And of course, because they were very important people, very important dignitaries, they went right up to the front where the Rebbe was. And they assumed, of course, they were going to watch and see the joyous Simchas Torah celebration, the HaKafos. But that's not what happened. What happened was, and here you have, just to put in perspective, you have 770 packed with thousands and thousands, no exaggeration, Hasidim. And these two men, when we're told by the Rebbe to go straight to the front, and they're about to start the Hakafos, the dancing with the Torah, but the Rebbe stopped. They stopped singing. They weren't doing the dancing. The Rebbe started speaking to them very urgently. And the Rebbe said, for an hour, the Rebbe spoke to these two men, as all of the Hasidim, of course, are trying to hear. And of course, are waiting for Hakafos. And of course, no, there's a war going on in Israel, and it's the Yom Kippur War, and there's a lot of tension going on. Of course, at this point already, the tide has turned for the Jewish people. But what the Rebbe kept saying was, and the Rebbe said it to these men very strongly to pass on the message to the heads of the Israeli government. The Rebbe said, the war is not an existential threat to Israel, but the war effort, I'm going into all these details just because I want you to understand this point we were saying. The war effort should be concentrated on the north in the battles with Syria. At that time, you had two nations trying to crush Israel, Syria from the north, Egypt from the south. And at first, unfortunately, it was very grim, but then God made a tremendous miracle and they both sort of stopped to regroup, which gave the government, the army time, and they were pushing them back. So Israel is now fighting a war on two fronts, against Syria in the north and against Egypt in the south. At that time, conventional thinking perceived Egypt as the main threat. And at this point, the night of Simchas Torah, Israel had already pushed back the Egyptian forces. Israel had already crossed the Suez Canal. They were advancing south. And the Rebbe said, that's pointless. You're not going to gain anything. You're not going to gain anything for Israel strategically in Egypt. But the ultimate and more difficult enemy of Israel is Syria, whose ancient capital, Damascus, is the symbol of strength by the whole Arab world. Conquer Damascus. And they're like, what? We can't do that. Washington would never let us. And everybody was very scared because Syria was an ally with Russia. And then Russia's going to get involved. And the Rebbe said, no, it's not true. We can't just leave this. Yes.
When was this time from?
This discussion was in 1973 during the Yom Kippur War, the night of Simchas Torah.
Okay, so my internet is cutting in and out. Yes. So I heard night of Simchas Torah, and I thought you were talking about that, and then I realized you weren't. So, okay, sorry to
no
stop
problem.
you. Thank you.
And the Rebbe's point was, and again, maybe I'm taking too long on this point, but I just want you to understand the whole perspective. The Rebbe's point was, you can't go through this whole war, the Yom Kippur War, with all the loss of life, with all the suffering, with all the casualties, and just go to status quo. What was before the war? We're not going to gain anything. We're still going to have this horrific enemy to the north that's just going to use any opportunity they can to destroy us. If you conquer Damascus, even if only for a short time, and obviously we know you're not going to ultimately keep it, you're going to rescue the Israeli captives. You're going to cause the collapse of the Syrian regime, which was the leading opposition to the State of Israel's existence at the time. And if we can do this, we can have peace with the Arab world. But as long as Syria is strong and Damascus is strong, there's never going to be peace. They're just going to keep harassing us. And they went into many, 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 many details that I'm not going to go into now because I know it will take a long time. But again, these men, these very high men in the Israeli government said, Israel doesn't want to do that because the Soviets are allied with the Syrians. United States isn't going to let. They're going to be very against it. We're going to lose American support. All the arguments you hear now have always been around. And the Rebbe said, no, that's not true. He said the Soviets is empty threats. He said America wants you to do this. Whatever they tell you, they want you to do this. Anyway, not going to go into all of the details of the story. Bottom line, they went back home. They called and called and called anyone they had connections to in the Israeli government, and nobody listened. But I was bringing this out, not like, oh, wow, it would have been so good because then we wouldn't have, what we have now going on in the north. But to understand this point, again, why should we understand the point? What does it help if we understand the point? We're not politicians running the state of Israel. We're Jews. We're believers. When we know it and we believe it and we say it and we talk about it, we're creating an energy in the world that will strengthen this happening. And the fourth point, which goes back to what we started in the beginning with Dorit and Rina and Yael, all giving their perspective on this. And I'm going to give you mine, which I believe Torah's, not to overthink the world support or the world condemnation of Israel. So many times in the past, we have said, oh, when some horrific, brutal thing happens from the Arab world, for the terrorists, now the world will see. Now the world will understand. Now the world will get it. Now they've acted so barbarically, we will have world support. Don't go in that direction. Don't count on support, even of people that officially are our allies. That can't be the basis of our strategy. Of course, we like it when the world supports us. That is helpful on many levels. But it can't dictate our strategy. We need to protect ourselves. If the world is saying what we're doing is great, if the world is saying what we're doing is horrible, we just have to stand strong. And honestly, in the end, the world respects us for it. And definitely the Arab world knows and understands the language of being strong, of being tough. That's the only language they really respect. And anytime we give in, the Arab world views it as weakness, and they go for more. So again, all of these things is a Torah perspective. Philosophically, how we look at all of these conflicts. And again, it's not new to what's happening today. It's always been true. And by us reaffirming and feeling and sharing and talking and saying these things, we're putting out an energy that will strengthen the ability of people that are going to make decisions, to make the Torah decisions, to make the decision according to halacha, to make the decisions where the focus is protecting Jewish lives. Not politics, not honor, not money, not other people's support, but protecting Jewish lives. And of course, as we said, we want to really strengthen trust in all of this, joy in all of this. We want to really strengthen the idea that God is in control. And during the Yom Kippur War, the Lvov Rebbe had a joyous rebellion, and he said, you could question, why are we doing this now? And he said, that's the point. This is our arsenal. I was in New York, surrounded by Israelis, surrounded by people that lived in these areas under attack, surrounded by women and girls that have brothers, fathers, sons in the army. And we all knew we have to add in joy, we have to add in dancing, we have to add in singing. That's our power. And over this week, one thing, yes, that has been nice to hear is the miracles that actually did happen then. Obviously, it doesn't excuse and wash away one drop of the atrocities, but there were miracles that did happen. There were lives that were saved, and maybe from our joy, maybe from Jews all over the world that added into Tehillim, that added in joy, that added that day in doing things to create a spiritual victory. I'm sure many of you have heard. I'm not going to go in any detail, but there were things. They know now that Hamas had a list of 22 moshavim and kibbutzim to attack, and they skipped 2 of them because they were Shomer Shabbos. Their gates were closed. You could see it on video footage. They came, they saw the closed gate, and they left. Now, that makes no sense. But literally, that is what happened. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, who knows? Who knows what Jew or many Jews, what many Jews were doing in the world that created that miracle, that they literally did not attack 2 of those 22 kibbutzim. I'm sure you've all heard of this woman, Rachel, and her husband, whose inner strength must be unbelievable. When she talks, if you understand Hebrew, you can hear her telling the whole story. She seems like such a simple woman. She's not a simple woman. For 20 hours, she and her husband were hostage, and somehow they survived. And it still makes no sense. Whatever she did, and her cookies, and her feeding them, and her distracting them, in the end of the day, it makes no sense. How did they survive? Who knows who was doing what in the world that made that happen? There was a group of soldiers in Eilat that heard what happened. They jumped into their jeeps, and they went to one of the moshavim. Why they picked that one, I don't know. 3 hours away, and they saved it. 2 people did die in that moshav, but nobody else, and nobody was taken hostage. How did that happen? And how did they let them take the time to make a 3-hour drive there? Again, this is in Hebrew, very poignant. A grandfather saying he got a text from his son, there's terrorists, and he said, I have to rescue my son and my grandson. He went down, and again, a very long story, makes no sense. He rescued the whole moshav. Makes no sense. Who knows what Jews were doing that made this happen? And many other stories. I'm sure many have heard the story with the man with the tzitzit, a family that managed to hold off a terrorist from a barricaded room. It makes no sense. People that did escape from the festival running for hours. It's all just like, yes, what we do has a power. And we don't know when we're doing something where that energy is going. We don't know. We're saying extra Tehillim. Who is it benefiting? We're inspiring someone to put on tefillin. Which soldier is being protected? What miracle is happening because of that? But they need lots and lots and lots and lots of miracles. And what we're doing really makes a difference. And it's like we're all fighters. We're all in different brigades. We're in different divisions. There's the spiritual army. And from that strength, the physical army can fight. It says in the Talmud that King David's general, his name was Yoav ben Surya. He was victorious because of David. What was David doing? Sharpening his weapons? David was studying Torah. David was praying. And David's spiritual arsenal gave Yoav physical victory on the battlefield. When the Talmud is saying it, it's giving us a very strong message. We need to be that David. Very, very important to internalize the message and to share the message and to keep giving this message wherever you can. I know I said it last week and I know I'm saying it again because we need to fight this army and we need to be recruiters. We need to recruit other people, Jews and non-Jews, to spiritually be adding arsenal for our troops. And if what we're saying is truthful, this is very truthful, and it comes from our heart, I'm sure it comes from every one of our hearts, it will penetrate the other person's heart. And keep saying it till they respond. Tefillin, mezuzah. My son just traveled Monday to Israel. Someone came by and gave him quite a number of mezuzahs, like a whole stack of mezuzahs to put up there. Anyone you know who does not put on tefillin, you could convince them tefillin is protecting a Jew in Israel. Your mezuzahs will protect the Jews in Israel. Charity, lighting Shabbos candles. So many people lit Shabbos candles this past week that never lit before. There was an audio of an Israeli woman saying how Israeli woman, she lives in Israel. She doesn't know how to light. She never lit. She doesn't have anything to light. Please help. She wants to light. So many Jews kept Shabbos one way or another that never kept Shabbos before. I heard about 2 boys that kept Shabbos this past Shabbos, and they said it felt so good. They want to do it every week. When we add in prayers, so many parts of prayers, we ask to destroy the enemy. When we add in Psalms and Tehillim, when we add in charity, charity saves from death. They need our miracles. A friend of my son, this past week, he was recruited and he was sent to the area where the terrorists were, in the south. And they split them up into different groups. Some groups were searching for terrorists because they know, of course, there's more terrorists still in the area. And some groups were searching for bodies. So he was with a group of another 4 soldiers. They were searching for bodies. So there's 5 of them, and a group of terrorists found them and started shooting at them. And he said to my son, he said he thought he was going to die. And one of his, of course, they're fighting back, but again, they were looking for bodies, not for terrorists. They weren't armed that way. One of the soldiers got wounded. The commander got wounded the most seriously. He thought he was going to die. And then God made a miracle. And other Israeli soldiers that were looking for terrorists found them and killed the terrorists. That was a miracle. 5 Jews alive today that wouldn't have been alive if it wasn't for that miracle. I'm sure many of you saw the pictures. There was a helicopter. I don't know how this helicopter had 50 soldiers. It really does look like an army helicopter. But it got shot down. When it gets shot, when a missile hits it, it's supposed to crash and everyone's supposed to die. And somehow the pilot managed to land it and everyone jumped out and then it exploded. You can see in the pictures, completely exploded. And not one soldier in it was hurt. That's a miracle. That's a miracle that makes no sense. But our spiritual arsenal created that miracle. They need our spirituality to create miracles. There's so many wounded soldiers. My cousin is in the Miluim. He's in the reserves, but he's a nurse in a hospital, and they're keeping him there because there's so many wounded soldiers. So all of the things we're doing, the unity, all the addition of the commandments, the zuzah and tefillin, the achdut, this should be enough. Thinking positive, focusing on things, manifesting and strengthening that Israel, the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, is the safest place in the world. We can create the spiritual arsenal to destroy the enemy and save every captive. We all know what happened this past Friday. Hamas said, it's the day. Massacre Jews all over the world. And nothing happened. Who knows what we did to create that miracle? People were taking it very seriously. A woman I know, her nephew works in the FBI, and he told his aunt, he said, it's very real. Tell all your friends don't leave their homes. It's a very real threat. It's not words. It's real. They're planning on attacking. I'm in Chicago. And I was thinking the night before, my son is flying alone. He's 15 years old to New York. I don't know. Should I not let him fly? I don't know. It's his ticket. It's his yeshiva starting. And I was like, no, I can't give in. That's strengthening terrorism. We're not going to stay in our homes on Friday. We've got life to lead. We've got Shabbos to bring in. We have things to do. We're not going to be scared. And there's actually Another friend of my son's, he's in charge of the security of a moshav in the Shomron, which anyway, they always have problems with the Arabs. My son was speaking to him before Thursday night, and he's like, well, it's good I know Israel is the safest place in the world. Otherwise, this will be a very scary day coming up. Nothing happened. No Arab attacked. Who knows how many zechuyot, how many merits from the spiritual brigade created that worldwide protection of all Jews all over the world.
Mrs. Turin,
yes,
I have to ask.
Yes.
So then, why does Hashem make us and these poor people suffer in the way that they did? Like, what?
You know, my daughter said to me the same thing because my son went back on Monday, and my 13-year-old daughter is like, Ma, how could you let Naphtali go back? And I'm like, this is what Torah says. Israel's the safest place in the world. That's what the pasuk says. It's the safest place in the world. She's like, well, what about all these people? I don't think I gave her an answer. I don't think I can give you an answer. There's belief, there's bitachon, and that has to determine our reality. And when we see something that makes no sense, we turn to Hashem with a very big complaint. And we say that to Hashem. And we say it to him very, 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 very strongly. But we don't let that complaint take away our belief. You know, there's a famous incident that happened in the Holocaust. Happened in Auschwitz. I didn't say this to my daughter. Happened in Auschwitz. And it says that at a certain point, some of the, Jews in Auschwitz put God on trial for genocide. We're blaming the Nazis. There's a God. How is he letting this happen? And they actually made a movie out of this whole idea of putting God on trial in Auschwitz. And when the movie came out, a survivor of the Holocaust went to Rabbi Lipsker of Florida, a Chabad rabbi there, and he said to him, I was there. I was part of that jury in putting God on trial, like they did in the movie. They said, but it wasn't like the movie. Or they said, really, how was it different? Did it happen? Did it not happen? He said, everything happened, except one thing. After it was all over, after we put God on trial, after we found him guilty for genocide, we said, and now we have to pray. That's what they didn't put in the movie. That's what they couldn't have fathomed or understood. And that's a Jew. We say, God, your only child. Every single Jew is your only child in the safest place in the world on the holiest day. God, why are you letting your name being disgraced? It's like we're saying Avinu Malkeinu. Take care of it for your sake. Because we're tied with you. We're linked with you. Whatever happens to the Jewish people, the world knows this is about God. This is a disgrace to God. So we say all that, and we mean all that, and we scream, and we cry, and we're in pain, and we believe. Because we're not going to let anything take away our belief. And that belief will allow the truth to be manifest.
We have a question in terms of whether whatever energy we are creating, whatever power we are tapping into. So there's the power that we tap into that, as you said, can help facilitate the miracles that are needed, where we go above Teva. But then, as you also pointed out, someone like, let's say, the Rebbe could have the Torah knowledge, and not just him, but we know of other people who have also said, here's what you have to do. But then the Israeli leaders are not listening and taking in that advice. And instead, they're still kowtowing to the UN or America or whoever else they think they have to kowtow to, or even the left within Israel that at least has shifted a bit right now at the moment. How do we reconcile or for example, I know Chabad serves in the army, but the army is not following, let's say, halacha in terms of following the basics of everything from a preemptive strike to saying, no, don't worry about who you're shooting, because yes, collateral damage, don't worry about it. Save the Jewish lives. How do we reconcile that? And how do we reconcile sending someone into an army when the army itself doesn't take direction from halacha at this point in time? Right, Hashem, they will, but they don't presently.
We do. That was exactly my point. Every one of us is so powerful that when we know it and believe it and say it and affirm it to yourself, to your friends, to your family, we just keep repeating the truth and believing in the truth. It creates a spiritual shift. We will give strength and backbone to people that need it, to people that need it. You know, it's easy for us to say we're not in those positions, and we're steeped in a lot of spiritual energy that we can see clearly Jewish law and Torah and halacha and the value of Jewish lives, and everything military is what we focus on, not politics. We can see it very clearly. We're not in the position where our eyes are clouded, and we have a lot of spirituality that helps us see Torah now. But the more we believe it and say it and think it and believe it and say it and think it, we're putting the energy out in the world. And hopefully with that energy that we're all putting out, and it's not just this group of people here or whoever happens to listen to this class, I'm sure all over the world people are talking about this, I hope. And all over the world Jews are adding. And it's almost like I was thinking there's the sages say the hearts of Lev Melachim Asar B'Yad Hashem. The hearts, sorry, it's actually a verse. The hearts of kings and officers are in the hand of God. There in 1990, around then, Lubavitcher Rebbe sent a message to Professor Herman Branover, who was a leader of Soviet Jewry in Israel, a leader in Russia, and had an organization in Russia called Shamir. He's a very famous Jewish scientist. The Rebbe sent him a message. The Rebbe said, the Jews from Russia are going to get out, build housing. The Jews from Russia are going to get out. Gorbachev just took over. He was claiming he was going to be a hardliner. He was saying they had just started in Russia this thing called glasnost, opening up freedom a tiny drop. And he said, forget this glasnost business. We're going back to hardline communism. And all of Brownover's contacts in Russia, that he had a whole network called Shamir. They all said the same thing. No, we're going backwards. It's getting much, much worse. And Professor Brownover sent him a message. Lubavitcher says, you're getting out. And he believed as much as one could fathom in those days. And he gathered the money and built a housing complex for about 3,000 families. That was a huge, ridiculous leap of faith. And then, of course, the borders opened up and Israel was flooded with tens and tens of thousands of Jews from Russia. Fast forward many years, and Gorbachev is taking a tour, a world tour. He's like, this big hero. Under his leadership, communism was dismantled. And he came to Israel. And when he came to Israel, he met with Branover as this famous Russian Jew, and Gorbachev, they met. And Branover told him this whole story. Branover said, when you first took leadership, and he told him the whole story. And Gorbachev responded and said, you know what? All your contacts were right. I wasn't planning on dismantling communism. I was planning on going back to hardline communism. I was planning on going backwards, taking away any freedoms that glasnost had opened up. What happened? I don't know. Didn't somehow work out that way. Lev Melachim Asar B'Yad Hashem. The hearts of the kings and the officers are in the hand of God. Even the Jewish ones. Probably the Jewish ones are the hardest, but even the Jewish ones. We're going to trust that. So when we do our spiritual arsenal, and we're building more and more and more and more and more spiritual arsenal, and we're trusting and we're reaffirming the land of Israel is ours. God gave it to us. Jewish law says we fight. Jewish law says we fight preemptively. Jewish law says we focus on Jewish lives. Nothing else matters. Jewish law says don't worry about the world's opinion. They'll love you, they'll hate you. If you actually stick up, they'll respect you, but don't even think about that. Just do what it takes to protect Jewish lives. As we think about this and believe this, we're building up the spirituality of these forces in the world, and leave Melachim V'sarim B'yad Hashem, the hearts of kings in the hand of God, and people willingly or somehow, without even planning on it, will make right choices. I say my son's in Israel, so I hear a lot of stuff that's not going around. It's not great stuff to hear. And I ignore it. I say, no, I'm not listening to any of that. I'm trusting that all of the spiritual arsenal of Jews united, I think of a bigger power than that, of Jews trusting, of Jews all over the world, adding in stucco, adding it to Tehillim, adding in love for each other, and adding in prayers, and adding in the commandments. That's going to create a victory like it or not, want it or not, plan it or not. So that's what I've been feeling when these thoughts come to my head. That's my response to myself. Spirituality is what makes a difference. It doesn't make a difference what people are planning or thinking or saying or doing. We trust God, and we have to build and build and build the spiritual arsenal, and God will make miracles people are expecting or not expecting. Right? I mean, before the 6-day war, they went out to look for more graveyards. What could they turn into graveyards? That was what their head was. And somehow, thinking or not thinking, it became the miracles of the 6-day war. So we do, and we trust, and we're confident, and we hope, and we believe in Torah, and we do more, and we do more, and we do more, and the miracles will happen. So please know it, believe it, say it, and share it. Be recruiters. Get other people to join the army. Get other people to know their power. Every single Jew or non-Jew who wants to do can be part of the army, can do and create the victories. And like Yael said, we all want to do. We all want to do. And when we're adding and giving these gifts of spirituality and trust and believing in Torah and believing in halacha and knowing that's what determines reality, it will.